Hello, in this video we're going to take a very quick look at the jQuery input mask demo. So just like a lot of the additional JavaScript libraries that we use in RackForms, these are just questions that I receive and then I just do a quick internet search for some library that might do what I want, and then I usually just add it to RackForms. What's important though is that you don't need us to create these for you. If there's ever a library that you need to use and you just want to build it into RackForms, you can do that. And so as always with these videos, we're going to show you how you can build this into RackForms and then also how to use this particular library. So let's start off with the how to use it. So in this particular case, we wanted to create an input mask. So I just did a very quick web search for jQuery masked input field, and I very quickly and immediately found this website right here. So jQuery mask plugin. I then just did a really quick test of what the plugin was doing, and I said, okay, well that's pretty much what I want it to do. So at this point then, I usually will take a look at the example code, and lovely enough, this was a really easy item to use. So for example, to get this date mask right here, this is essentially all that's needed, is just to say .mask and then put our input mask field that we want. So seeing how easy it was, I said, okay, this is great, let's use it. So the next step then was to find the actual source code for the plugin. It looks like it's on GitHub right here, but because they're actually using a live demo right here, I decided that I'd actually just find it this way. So I'd go to the script tab in Firebug, I'd find jQuery mask.min.js, and I said, well, that's got to be the mask plugin. And then I loaded up the actual source code, and then I right-clicked and said open a new tab. And then this gives me the actual source code of the plugin. At this point then, I would take all this source code, I'd copy it, and then in RackForms, I'd find my app, move files, additional JSLibs folder. I would then create a new folder that contains the plugin that I want, and then I would create the jQuery, in this case, plugin file that the source code is going to use. So I just essentially create this right here. Then I create a text file called RackForms-include-code, and then this file is described in this README right here, but as a very brief synopsis, it essentially takes the two input or the two source code includes that I'd want to use. In this case, it grabs the most recent version of jQuery and then also links to this particular file. And then it gives, in this case, a short example of how we'd use the file. And essentially what's going to happen is when I build this job in RackForms, is this actually going to take this part of the script that is included in this entire file and just going to append it to the head code section of my page. And importantly, it's these two files that we want to include. Now we don't have to do it this way, but what's nice is this means that it's now included in the editor and we never have to actually worry about including jQuery and the actual source code for this particular script. Now I realize I'm talking a little bit fast here. I want to go and cover most of this quickly. Again, you can read more about this in the README file along with a link that shows this process in more detail. But anyway, to jump forward then, now that I have a folder called input mask right here, the next time I reload RackForms, I can select the page that I have, skip down to the page JavaScript section, and that library will now be available for me to select right here. So here it is, input mask. Okay, so now that I selected the input mask then, as we can see from the directions, using this plugin is pretty simple. We're going to copy from here to here, as it suggests, and place this into a raw block code section. And so I've created a raw block code section right here, and I've pasted it into the raw block code area. Now, as a matter of fact, I'm actually going to update this just in real time right here. As you can see, these are essentially living documents. We don't have to kind of nail this down in stone. I can actually create different versions of this as needed. But so basically, I take this raw block code and I just now have to create two items that match the selectors that I'm using in this code. So in this case, I have a field called date and one field called student ID. And by called, I mean that's what its ID is. So here is student ID, and we put that field value right there. As we saw right here, we have one other called date, and so you notice that this field has a name value of date. And so as long as I have that now, I now have my two working masks. And by the way, I should actually point out right here that a lot of times if we have, not a lot of times, all the time, if we have a source code include like this, we need to make sure that this isn't a valid script file. So I'm just going to go ahead and put a space between this backslash and the script right there so that it doesn't actually count as a real script. And therefore we don't get that junk at the top of the thing. So anyway, now I can just start typing. I get my mask right there, and in this field I provide a little hint to my users to say this is the mask that's going to be applied. And that's basically it then. Again, I know we went a little bit fast right here, but as a very brief review, if there's ever a bit of functionality, JavaScript included, or possibly CSS and whatnot, that I want to include in RackForms, perform a search, find a plugin that you like, then go into your RackForms folder, go into the app, move files, additional JS libs, create a folder with a name that makes sense for it, and create at minimum 2 files. The jQuery, JavaScript, or any other type of include file that you want, and then a text file called RackForms include code. Notice the exact spelling in this right here. A lot of times, just to make sure you type these in right, I actually like to take an existing plugin and just kind of duplicate the folder. Then to the jQuery, in this case, file, we're going to copy in the source code for the plugin. And for this guy right here, we're simply going to include any libraries that this depends on. Because again, this gets included in the head code section of our page. And so therefore, I want to include jQuery, and I want to include the raw script for the source. At this point, we're done, but as we've done in this script, I've actually included some additional instructions on how to use it right here, just in case I use this thing a year from now and I forget exactly how it works. With that done then, it's really a matter of configuring the form so it uses that plugin. So in this case, because we're using JavaScript, I created a block element, and then to the raw block code, I've simply have pasted in some example code right here that's going to look for 2 fields with a date and student ID name. And because in RackForms we can of course name things, I'm going to make sure that I have date and student ID set for name value right here. And then when I run this form, we have our mass applied to those fields. And that's basically it then.